Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Jubilance session. I red tea, 5 consecutive weeks. Next week we're going to do late away. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's find out why we should be so jubilant in drinking today's tea. So let's first start by talking about ancient and old tree resources in China. Oh, no. You know what? I'm going to back up. Somebody asked me a question last week, and let me answer that question because I went down a rabbit hole this week looking at trichomes. Somebody asked about the nutritional value of trichomes. And truth be told, I didn't really know the answer. Well, now I have a much better idea. There's tons of stuff written on trichomes, truly tons of stuff. So basically, when you're in the tea arena, trichomes are doing the following things. They're acting as antimicrobials, anti-insect, antitoxin, trying to, and that would be toxins that biological, like plants, other invasive plants or insects would try and leave. They fight against that. That's their main function. Turns out that with tea trichomes, they also express flavonoids, amino acids, and so they do have an influence on flavor. However, I find no literature to support the idea that, oh, I better get a full trichome cup of tea because my health is going to blossom because of that. And the answer is, I can't find anything which would make me believe that that's true. I'll keep looking because, like I said, there was a tremendous amount of information about trichomes. So I've gotten that taken away. Let's go to old tree. And I'm going to call old tree because I'm going to talk about decades old, hundreds of years old, and thousands of years old. That's how I'm going to divide everything. So let's talk first about 100 years. We're not in the decades. We got the decades off. 100 years or older in Yunnan province alone, at least 20 million trees. So this doesn't really tell you how many thousands of year-old trees there are. And I'm not sure that there's a real accurate number about that. And part of the issue related to that is within the, well, first off, trying to make a judgment. Oh, is this one 900 years old? No, it's only 885. No, it's 1,002. You know, you're making those kind of judgments. 100 and above, that's an easier judgment to make. So they're not concentrated one area. If you asked for the largest concentration, you'd say around the Ailao Mountains. The second largest concentration would be the Linsang area. Jubilance comes from the Linsang area. So there are many other areas we've talked about over the last couple of years. Yiwu area, Bingdao area, a bunch of different areas around Simao, Pu'er. All these areas have groves of old to ancient trees. Outside of Yunnan, are there ancient trees? I think this question has come up before, and I think that I've given the right answer, but I'm going to be more specific now. So in Sichuan, there are definite areas where there are some ancient trees, particularly around Chongqing. In Hainan Island, there are some ancient trees. Not a lot, but there is a community of them. There's more ancient and old trees in Guizhou. Guangxi has groves of ancient and old trees. So they're scattered around, but Yunnan appears to be the home base where everything then radiated outwards. I even found, as I was looking at this whole issue, Fujian in Fujian province, they have an area where they used to have ancient trees. You can see the remnants of them. There aren't, as far as I know today, ancient trees there. However, have they been everywhere in all of these provinces? And it turns out really they haven't, because some of these places are really remote. It's just so hard to imagine that anywhere in China hasn't been explored. Well, it's hard to imagine until you go there. And then you see some of these really forbidding places and you say, oh, no wonder that hasn't been explored. So they continue, scientists and explorers continue to push into the hinterlands and are regularly making new findings in terms of old to ancient tree. But this is a long process. So that's the backdrop against what we're going to talk about today. So I want to go back to what I said before. Decades, age trees, 100-year age trees, 100 to 1,000-year age trees, 1,000 and more. 3 divisions. Is there a way? And by the way, all of you have hinted around this question. Some of you have asked a very similar question, which is, can we tell the age of a tree by how it tastes? So the answer is not 100% definitive. However, the research during this last year or two has shown us trends. What are the trends? You get the 1,000-year and older. Typically, it'll make a tea water that's more yellowish than reddish. The 100 years to 1,000 make the deepest red. What causes the red again? That would be the theorubicans. That's a compound, and that's an oxidative compound. It's a polyphenol within red tea. And you get more astringency. I mean, a lot more percentage-wise astringency in the decades old. So 0 to 100. And it falls off dramatically once you get to the 1,000-year-old, 1,000 and over. So characteristically, we talk about, well, why is it that ancient tree is so mellow and grounding and so forth? Well, it turns out that their constituents are in different ratios than the constituents in the hundreds of years old and the decades old tea trees. And they've done this last year, they produced a real good report about that. A really detailed report about that. Turns out that certain amino acids are much more in the 1,000-year-old. And surprisingly, L-theanine, I was surprised, is more abundant in the thousands of year olds. So 1,000 or over years old trees. So the hypothesis of this paper, and this paper was written in China, it was written by people who know what they're doing, scientists, good scientists, and scientists who were not only using human measurements, but they were using the electric tongue, electric sniffer. So they were doing all the comparisons side by side. They were standardizing, everything used the same water, same source. It was a truly, really good exploration of this question. And again, their question is, hey, I wonder if I'm tasting tea, can I tell the age of where it comes from? The tentative answer is we're working on it. And they think the answer is really yes. And they think it's yes for some compounds that have 15 or 16 letters in them that the ancient tree have less of. And therefore, it seems to, these particular compounds seem to increase the astringency feeling in the mouth. So if you have less of that, then you have less of that feeling. Also, some of the oxidative properties in the ancient tree once it's been processed. Oh, and by the way, that's the other thing. The processing was done by the same factory. So there was no discrepancies. I mean, sometimes you get these studies where you got 6 different factories involved, and yeah, they say they're doing roughly the same processing. But here is one factory. Everything was clearly labeled. Everything was carefully handled because they're really trying to get a hold of that. And that's important because when you have these resources, and that's why I started out with what the old to ancient tree resources are. When you have these resources, the scientific community in China now realizes we got to focus a lot more attention on how to husband these resources. We understand that these resources are unique. We understand by area that they produce unique results. So intuitively, what we've done here over the years is set up a shop where you can taste from these different areas. Oh yeah, that tastes different than this. Same age, but it's a different area. So the micro terroirs make a difference. The amount of light, and by the way, this is what was in this study, the amount of light per area. So the elevations make a difference. The type of light. And, you know, I want to thank Peter because Peter has constantly focused my attention on the spectrum of light. You know, you have blue, purple, and you have your reds and greens and everything in between. And it really, and I've been seeing this in the studies over the last 6 or 7 years, but it hasn't struck home until I saw this study. This study I really understand because they truly identified, yeah, at this elevation and at this angle, the light comes in certain spectrums of the light. Certain parts of the spectrum come in, you know, for X number of hours, particularly if it's facing one direction, comes in a different way, and it makes a difference. They are now beginning to measure down to what that difference is. And so all these things that we have told you are true, but we had no proof. And we used our own sense of taste, and you verified it because as you've gone through, oh yeah, this does taste different. You know, a 1,000-year-old tree here is different than a 1,000-year-old tree there. You've said it, we've said it. Now the science is beginning to catch up and give the reasons why. There are even some compounds in the ancient tree that seem not to be they're in such small quantities in the hundreds years old versus the decades old. So the tea industry in China is very interesting because in the early years they said, hey, think about it this way, youthful and aged. You know, youthful, lots of energy bursting all over the place, a nuisance sometimes because you can't keep it contained. The aged, you know, refined, experienced. So when you have monoclonal tea, it's like teenagers. It's very astringent, comparatively speaking, all over the place, not as refined, so to speak, if you're drawing an analogy like this. And that's what the tea industry in China, from the very start, 25 years ago, when we were in Fujian, One of the tea experts said, oh, here's how to think about this. I said, okay.
Is the study you referenced publicly available anywhere?
Ah,
By what agency?
so the study is available. And what I will do instead of telling you that, answering your question, because you asked me a very direct question, and considering what I'm wearing today, I have to give you a very direct answer. The I can't remember which organization it's through. However, what I can do is send all of you the study. I can get it and I can send it to you. And then you'll have fun with the technical, and there's a lot of long words. This is why I love this study. It took me a bit to go through it, but it's a good study. I'll do that. Anything else? Okay, great. So moving forward, where's Jubilance from again? It's from close to Linsang. Linsang is away from, it's a little bit north of Kunming and to the west. And it's Linsang itself is 7,500 feet above sea level. But where this tea comes from is around 3,000 to 4,000 feet above sea level. And this is ancient tree. So how am I doing? Oh, I'm doing real good today. It's gone through the normal processing for what you would do with ancient tree. And it is actually, this particular one, they pick, they wither, they roll, and then they pile it and oxidize it. They have a two-step stage of actually drying the tea. So this is all stuff that you've heard me say before in terms of red tea. They go through that. The timings will be different than timings elsewhere. But this article is really pointing back to the fact that if you standardize everything, you can still get this. You can definitely tell a difference between age of where something is. So that's one aspect of what I wanted to talk about today. And this is linking up with a couple other things in the direction I was going when I said that the scientists in China are really paying attention to these resources. Why? Global warming is one of the main reasons. Number two is inconsistency of processing through the regions. And number three is sometimes not a very orderly way to preserve the areas. So they're trying to attack all three of these problems. Gain consistency in how it's processed, have a unified outlook and awareness of the temperatures seem to be warming over the last 25 years. Let's examine, let's test, let's make sure we're not losing our resource. Because the most hideous thing in the world would be is if these trees start dying for some unknown reason. And that's one of the reasons scientists, both in Yunnan and at the national level, are really focusing in on this because this is an important part of their economy. Tea, and these years, ancient tree tea has become instrumental in helping raise the livelihood of the farmers in these really off the road areas. These are really remote areas. And now these farmers are beginning to get rewarded for husbanding, taking care of the trees in such a good way. So what you're going to see and what you're going to hear from me, because I see this starting to pick up, are more measures related to the saving of the forest, preserving of the forest. Yes.
Are these tea preservation measures supported at the highest levels in China?
Great question. So the questioner asked, do the leaders in China love their tea that they have? And the answer is they absolutely love their tea. And yes, they are supported at the highest levels. And there's many reasons to support tea. One is it's an economic tool for the Chinese. Two, it's a cultural, intangible cultural asset. It's actually a very tangible cultural asset for the Chinese. The leaders drink tea. They're not drinking anything else, essentially. They're drinking tea. Well, let me back that up. Before a banquet time, they're essentially drinking tea. Now, obviously, when you get to banquet time, there's any source of or any number of choices for beverage. But during the days and getting their days started, yeah, they're really focused on that. And the money for this actually oh, great. So we gave you a little bathroom break. So um, now we can continue. I love new equipment, by the way, because new equipment always has its idiosyncrasies. And that's what we just experienced. So really what I was talking about was the fact that the Chinese are alert to this. They are paying attention to this. All right. I think that that's it for the start of the presentation. I think what we want to do is taste this thing because this is one of our really special ancient treatise. So without further ado, let's go ahead and see if I can find the tea master and see if we can do a demonstration and then taste it together. All right. Tray and 3 clean cups and a strainer, but I don't have a tea master. Oh, wait a minute. The glamorous tea master shedding light over everything has shown up right here. Good morning, glamorous tea master.
Thank you very much.
Oh, okay, okay. I get to stand next to
Good
you.
Good morning. Yeah, I'm so happy, this looking at a lot of camera here. So we do red tea jubilance. This I prepare 7 grams.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there's 7 grams, and this is a 7-gram 3-minute. And so Biju is preparing the water. I'm putting 3 minutes on the timer. Heating the cups. And you can use any temperature of water between 170 and 212 for this step. And take a look at the T rhythm. Tea Master is drawing water. 175 degree is the temperature comes out of the spout. We'll cool it down to about 170. As with all ancient tree tea, you want to have it at a temperature that's not too hot because the science will prove in years coming up forward that there's reasons that you don't brew too hot and that they really do affect the constituents of the tea. And we know this experientially because when you do it at a lower temperature, you get more of the fragrances and it's just brighter. Not in a rush, just making sure all the cups. And by the way, in your setup, 2 cups is enough. We use 3 because we're trying to make a little bit more at one time. We're going through a couple rounds. Tea Master puts the tea leaves in the cup. Smells them to make sure they're consistent with what we know Jubilance to be. Pours the waiting water back into the kettle so that which has a spout so that we can control where we pour. All right, and we've set the timer for 3 minutes. And while everybody is watching, I am going to update you on a bit of shop news, which I meant to do at the beginning, but better late than never. So we have the dates for the trip. We don't have the money yet, but we do have the dates. So the arrival on April 21st. Departure on April 29th. In Shanghai is the arrival and departure point. So that is all set up. We're still making a few changes in the itinerary, but basically we now have dates. And so for those of you who are trying to plan from that aspect, you have at least those. We're very close to pricing. Part of it is again, we're doing some experiments in China, or we have people doing experiments in China. You know, how long does it really take to drive here? And making sure that everything that we're calculating is precise. And so we expect by probably next week to have, next Saturday, we think we'll have prices as well. And then for those of you who are interested, we can start to take signups. So that's where we are with that. Sorry that this has taken so much longer. Part of the issue this time is we're trying to include places that we've never taken customers to before. And as such, we're trying to make sure that every calculation in terms of that is all smooth and that the receiving parties understand what our expectations are, because this isn't you just call up a farmer and you just show up and you watch for a few minutes and go. No, because there's participation, there's food, there's all the things that are necessary for a trip like this. So that's where we are with that. Sorry it's taking so long this year. Now, in terms of Jubilance, this area where it comes from, the trees are scattered through a smaller forest than the Ilam Mountains. And in fact, it's not anywhere near the density of what the Ilam Mountains are. The Ilam Mountains are really a dense forest, and you feel that you are definitely walking through a big and potentially dangerous forest. This place not. This is much smaller. All right, timer's gone off. Tea master separates the tea leaves from the tea water. Let's see what this thing looks like. Looks dark. Smells interesting. Let's enter the quality arena. You don't enter. I enter. And you notice I always have a rhythm of this. Not in a hurry. Trying to think about how it's feeling on my tongue. Trying to think about aftertaste. And then energetics. Okay, I'm going to enter a second time. This time I'll think more about taste, but I'll reinforce what I just perceived in terms of the astringency, aftertaste, and energetics. Okay, I have some sense of the taste and aroma. So I hope all of you have been taking notes. Get out your notes because you're about to taste something that's different than, say, last week, intuition, or the weeks previously, Downey Peak, which is from a completely different place. This is different. This is significantly different. It's your turn to brew. So this is in bag number 2, labeled Jubilance. 7 grams, 3 minutes. Set your timer for 3 minutes.
Comment about the dry leaves. The color of the dry leaves is incredible. So dark and rich, the dry leaves and the fruity and malty aroma.
Fruity and malty aroma for the dry leaves. I love this description. I love the fact that right away you note that these dry leaves are different than the dry leaves of the other teas we've had. And there's a richness to it, a fruitiness in the aroma. Oh, yeah. The terroir of this place is significantly different than the other places that you've had in this series for the red teas.
General health for Jubilance.
这些应该是1300，这股是1300、1400。
Each case.
Yeah, it's about 14 to 1500 years old. So actually, these are babies in comparison to the Ilau. Huh? Oh, what's it up? But that's not what these leaves are from. Yeah, 1400 to 1500 years old. You see the tea master, just very rhythmical. That's what you should be. Doesn't have to be the same speed, just needs to be rhythmical. Dissipating the steam, oxygenating the water. So there's two magics. You know what? I'll talk in a minute. Putting the tea leaves into the heated cup. Using no hands, making sure that everything is carefully entering the cup. Putting the water back into the kettle so I can control the pour. Setting the timer. This 3-minute steep. Heating the recipient cups. All right. We hit all the bases. So there's magic. And I say this advisedly because all of us are scientists. So as soon as you use the word magic, it seems like there's something fake going on. But what I really mean is there's craft going into the processing of the leaves. And then there's craft in the brewing. I really haven't talked much about what our achievements have been with the rules of these. And this will probably be one of the only times you hear me talk about it. And it'll be just very short to remind you that intuitively we did have an understanding that there were vast differences between the terroirs and that those translated it to vast differences in the brewing. But to bring those out, the farmer was the leader because, and the scientists, farmers and scientists are leaders. They figured out how to make a truly wonderful end product. We are craft with the brewing because we didn't rely on anybody else's instructions. We created our own instructions for all of these teas because we realized in China, tea masters there have what they consider best flavors. And we studied until we really grok that. And usually they're doing in the small cup. And so again, we got all those best flavors combined into the large cup for the American audience. So that's where our craft has come in. So this isn't an accident. It not only is it not an accident that you get access, but it's not an accident that the end result is what it is, because everybody has done their part to make this a truly unique experience. All right, we're almost to the end of this, so I'm not going to start down a new subject. Yes.
Comment in Tweedy dry leaves in bag yielded fresh morning meadow aroma in a warm, wet pot. I first thought of scents coming from slow cooking apples in butter and sugar, and the copper color broth aroma transitions to comforting, slightly vegetal aroma.
All right, that is a mouthful and a great start. Go ahead and separate the tea water from the tea leaves because your timer should have gone off, and I'll comment on that in a second. You know, it's just a nice rhythm here. Okay, and a great unusual color. So this commenter commented on the leaves first, the dry leaves, tweedy, and had almost like a meadow-like essence. The warm leaves, it was like, or in the pot, they were like, almost like apples. An apple scent, an apple, I believe apple cider.
With butter and sugar.
With butter and sugar. So, we're going Thanksgiving now. Butter and sugar and apples. Is there anything better? By the way, if you're thinking of serving a tea for Thanksgiving that will blow everybody away, this would not be a bad choice. So great comment about that. And then it morphed into something about vegetality.
Slightly vegetal aroma transitioning.
Okay. Vegetal aroma transition. In other words, it's a plant and it's a special plant. Great comment. Yeah.
Another one coming in. The warm leaves have a scent of malt and chocolate. The steep leaves have a scent of malt and floral. And the malt comes all the way through to the tea water. However, the fragrance of the tea water also has a complex dried fruit sweetness and a hint of tobacco.
Okay, we end up with a hint of tobacco. We start out with malt and chocolate. So the warm leaves, malt and chocolate, move forward into malt and floral. And then there's a transition from malt and floral. Where does it go?
It goes into the tea water. You get the fragrance also goes to the tea water, but then there's a complex dried fruit with a hint of tobacco in the tea water.
Thank you. Complex dried fruit with a hint of tobacco in the tea water. So this commentator, and thank you very much, this commentator really parses each of the segments of the experience. And that's what we all should be doing when we're in tea rhythm. Clearly in tea rhythm. And also notes that you get this whole wide range. And by the way, that there's some 84 compounds that in this previous study that I was talking about that scientists are using to evaluate, what's going on flavor-wise, color-wise. So the fact that you're getting all these different flavors is not surprising.
Picking up a little more astringency than last week's tea and apricot-like fruitiness in both the aroma and flavor.
More astringency than last week's tea and picking up a bit of apricot and what else?
In both aroma and flavor.
In both aroma and flavor. Great comment.
They're coming in right now. So initial impression from dry leaves was of roasted vegetables like mushrooms and yams.
Oh, interesting.
But the wet leaves smelled woodsy. The subtle sweetness led to hints of peach and brown sugar. And thanks for the comment about tobacco. Makes sense to me.
So we end up with peach and brown sugar. So we're getting a rhythm here and we're getting a theme. We heard apples and butter and sugar. We have some vegetality that's running through these comments. So sweetness, hint of fruit, hint of tobacco, vegetality, lot of things in common. It's really interesting. And by the way, listen to yourselves. We did not have these comments in the previous red teas. These are really different. Go back to the very start because
so the initial impression was of dry leaves, was roasted vegetable like mushroom.
That's right.
Yam. Then they got woodsy as it got wet.
Roasted vegetables, mushrooms and yams, and woodsy as it got wet. I want to really focus in on the first part of that. Roasted yams and mushrooms. Frequently, with very good red teas, you can get that sweet potato, that yam quality. And it's really great that you picked that up. Great catch.
Next comment is totally unique right off the bat. It tastes rustic and wild, not quite domesticated. This is like the difference between staying at a modern hotel in the woods, or in this case, a cabin in the mountains that was built long ago and has become a part of the mountains and is a true experience of the deep nature of the place.
Oh my God, you guys are really fabulous. So we're in a rustic log cabin built years ago, deep in the woods. This commentator uses the word, it has a sense of the wild, as if we're dealing with something that wasn't just planted by humans and controlled by humans. It's this wild here, especially in this usage, gives over to the thought of nature did this. Nature created this special tea. What did I miss in between wild and the very end log cabin? Did I capture it?
The comparison is like the difference between staying in a modern hotel in the woods versus a cabin in the mountains that was built long ago and has become part of the mountains and is a true experience of the deep nature of place.
I really like that phrasing also because it is this sense that these leaves and this tea, even though you're tasting it here in your modern homes, has never left nature's base and has really brought with it the wildness of the of its provenance. Great comment. Yeah.
Another one, true to ancient tea trees, it's deeply calming, grounding, and warming.
Ah, deeply calming and warming, grounding. And this commentator points back, it's ancient tea trees. Why wouldn't it be? And this is absolutely true. Great catch.
As well as the warming, it is incredibly thick. There's a viscosity to this tea.
Oh, I like this. There is a viscosity. And it's interesting because this commentator called the warming thick. And actually, that's a great characterization because I'm thinking right now how I'm feeling. I'm actually perspiring inside of this. And it's not because it's warm in here. It is not warm in here. It's because this tea is creating this feeling inside of me. And I actually feel it in my feet too, now that I'm thinking about it. The energetics of this tea are quite strong. And you are capturing it.
Yeah, I think an echo of that, this comment, feeling a slow warming. It's spreading like a tide filling in and out. So it's difficult to determine where it emanates from.
Great comment. Slow warming, like a tide ebbing and flowing in and out, difficult to see where it's coming from or to detect where it's coming from. And that's just exactly the experience I described to you because at first I said, well, upper body, I'm feeling warm. No, I'm not. It's the feet and it's everywhere. Great comment.
A very delicious tea and so different from the others in this series. Energetics I'm getting is improved alertness and grounding, lightly astringent.
Lightly astringent, improved alertness, and grounding. These are the energetics that this particular commentator is getting. And also this commentator highlighted this completely different than the other 5 teas or the other 4 teas we've had in this red tea series. And that is really true. This is Jubilance is not an accident. The name Jubilance is not an accident. When we first tasted this, it came to mind. It made me happy. It gave me the feeling of that grounding, but in a happy way.
Juicy and deeply warming, tiny bit of upper lip dryness.
Juicy and deeply warming. This commentator has a tiny bit of upper lip dryness. And, you know, it's funny as you're saying these things, I'm thinking about upper lip dryness. Oh my gosh, I have an upper lip dryness too. How'd that happen? It's it's really, this is why I like sharing this experience, because as we're learning about these teas, when we're in tea rhythm, and we clearly all are, sharing these comments helps us to understand the complexity and the depth and breadth of the tea. Great comment. Okay, good. Let's see how I'm doing. Oh, I'm doing good. What a rarity. Love the fact that your comments were so spot on for this tea. This tea, and truly, I wasn't kidding before when I said, if you have people who drink tea and are coming over for Thanksgiving, this would absolutely be a nice end to the meal. Have your meal, sit around and relax afterwards, and have a cup of Jubilance. It's full-bodied. It hits all the right notes, not super astringent, fruity, malty, vegetal, tobacco-y, chocolatey initially. It's got everything. What more could you ask for? And this is how I feel about all of you. You have everything. You all give me the complete picture of these teas every time. I salute you. I congratulate you as you get deeply into these teas and into tea rhythm. We want to wish everybody a wonderful Thanksgiving. And on the other side, that is next Saturday, we're going to do Laid Away. That's another red tea. Wonder what that one's going to be like. All right. Your responsibility this week. Well, first, don't get stressed out by Thanksgiving. That's the first part of the responsibility. Of course, it goes without saying, especially in this week, no illness allowed. No, that doesn't happen. Third thing, be happy with the friends and family around during Thanksgiving. And I am going to be ecstatically happy. Both of us are going to be ecstatically happy to see you next Saturday. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.